Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're taking a deep dive into India's energy situation.
Sounds fascinating.
It is, and it's especially important for anyone prepping for the UPSC exams.
All right.
We'll be looking at the latest from the Economic Survey 2024-25 and the Union Budget 2025-26.
Okay.
And we're basing our deep dive on some great reporting from the Indian Express.
Right.
Basically, India's trying to juggle energy security with a major push for renewables. It's a hot topic globally, and definitely one you'll see on the exam.
For sure.
So the big question is, can India actually ditch coal without risking its energy security? What do you think?
Well, it's complicated. First, we need to be clear about what energy security actually means. It's not just about having enough energy.
Right.
It's also got to be affordable and reliable, and it has to be sustainable, too.
Makes sense.
And for a country like India, with its huge population and its goal of becoming an economic superpower, energy security is absolutely crucial.
Couldn't agree more. It affects everything, from economic growth to political stability.
Absolutely. Even food security is tied in.
Wow. I see how this could pop up in so many different UPSC papers.
Yeah, it's a multidimensional issue.
And speaking of multidimensional, the economic survey threw me a bit of a curveball.
Oh.
It looks like coal is still king in India's energy mix.
Yeah, that's true.
I honestly expected a bigger shift towards renewables by now.
Well, there are a couple of reasons for that. First, India sits on about 10% of the world's coal reserves.
That's huge.
And we've already invested heavily in coal-based infrastructure. So switching away from coal too quickly would have some serious economic consequences.
I can imagine. Jobs, investments, the whole system could be disrupted.
Exactly. And it could even trigger an energy crisis if we aren't careful.
So practically speaking, we can't just slam the brakes on coal.
No, not overnight.
But what does that mean for India's climate pledges? I mean, we're committed to reducing emissions.
Right, and that's the dilemma. On the one hand, sticking with coal keeps energy secure and affordable, which India needs right now. But on the other hand, it does raise concerns about the environment and how India looks on the world stage in terms of fighting climate change. It's a tough balancing act. It is. And there's another layer to this. The developed countries haven't exactly delivered on their climate financing promises.
Right. They pledged to help developing countries transition to cleaner energy.
Exactly. And that shortfall makes it even harder for countries like India to move away from coal as quickly as they might want to.
So basically, we're being asked to go green without the support to make it happen smoothly.
That's a big part of it. And it highlights the need for India to find its own path to energy security, one that doesn't rely entirely on help from others.
Okay, starting to get a much clearer picture of how complex this really is. It's not as simple as swapping out coal for solar panels.
Definitely not.
This is about economics, politics, global dynamics, the whole works.
Exactly. And that brings us to the next piece of the puzzle, renewable energy. It's got huge potential, but also some real challenges.
Let's dive into that. We know India has set some pretty ambitious goals for renewable energy, but what's actually happening on the ground?
Well, the targets are impressive, but there are some hurdles. We're talking about high initial costs, issues with getting land for big solar and wind projects, and the whole challenge of integrating renewable energy sources into the existing power grid.
Especially in a country as densely populated as India, finding land must be a huge obstacle.
Oh, it is. And then there's the issue of relying on imported tech and materials to produce renewable energy.
So we'd be trading dependence on fossil fuels for dependence on foreign suppliers.
In a way, yes. And that raises concerns about supply chain vulnerability and potential price swings.
So the goal is to secure our own energy future.
Exactly. We need to prioritize energy independence and focus on building up domestic innovation in the renewable energy sector.
It seems like achieving a truly sustainable and secure energy future for India will require a multifaceted approach. What role does the recent union budget play in all of this?
The budget offers some valuable clues about the government's thinking. There are some initiatives aimed at boosting domestic production of critical minerals and tech, plus some customs duty exemptions to make renewable energy projects more attractive financially.
And I remember hearing about the National Critical Minerals Mission.
You got it. They allocated a significant chunk of money, Rs 410 crore, to that.
Why?
The goal is to ramp up domestic production of these crucial minerals, boost recycling efforts, and even look into acquiring mineral assets abroad.
Sounds ambitious. But will it be enough to really get India's energy transition moving faster? What potential roadblocks should we be watching out for?
That's something we'll explore further as we continue our deep dive. But before we do, let's step back for a moment and look at how other countries have handled their own energy transitions. Maybe there are some lessons India can learn from their experiences.
Great idea. Let's rewind a bit and get some historical perspective. It's fascinating to see how other countries have dealt with these shifts in their energy systems.
History shows us that countries rarely switch energy sources just for environmental reasons.
Really.
It's usually driven by economics and geopolitics.
So, pragmatism over idealism. Interesting. Can you give us some examples?
Sure. Take France's decision to expand nuclear power in the 1970s. That wasn't just about going green. It was a strategic move in response to the global oil crisis. And more recently, even with its climate commitments, the U.S. approved a huge oil drilling project in Alaska. It shows how vital energy security still is.
So it seems like when push comes to shove, energy security often wins out over environmental concerns.
Often, yes. And then there's the whole issue of what are called congestion costs that
No.
come with transitioning to renewables.
Okay, you've got my attention. What are congestion costs?
Imagine you're trying to fit square pegs into round holes.
Mm.
That's kind of what it's like trying to integrate renewable energy sources, which are intermittent, into a power grid that's designed for steady baseload power. It creates inefficiencies and bottlenecks. And those inefficiencies translate into higher electricity prices, which can impact the economy.
So it's not just about switching out energy sources, it's about rethinking the entire system.
Exactly. A holistic approach is needed, looking not just at where our energy comes from, but also at the infrastructure and market mechanisms needed for a sustainable and secure energy future.
This has been incredibly eye-opening. Before we move on to part 2 of our deep dive, a quick reminder to all our listeners who are working hard on their UPSC prep. Hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave us a comment with any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes.
We love hearing from you. And a big thanks to the Indian Express for their fantastic reporting, which we're using as the basis for our discussion today. We'll be back soon to continue our deep dive into India's Energy Balancing Act.
Okay, so we're back and ready to keep exploring this whole energy situation in India. Let's zoom in on renewable energy. What's the current status? Where do things stand right now?
Well, as of November 2024, India has a pretty impressive 213,701 megawatts of installed capacity from non-fossil fuel sources.
Wow, that's a lot.
It is. That's almost 47% of our total electricity capacity.
So are we on track to hit that ambitious 50% target by 2030?
We're definitely moving in the right direction, but we have to remember installed capacity isn't the whole story. We also need to look at actual energy generation.
Right. How much of our electricity is actually coming from those renewable sources?
Exactly. And in 2022-23, about 23% of India's total generation came from non-fossil fuels. Large hydro projects contributed the biggest chunk, followed by solar, wind, and biomass.
So good progress, but still a way to go. And speaking of bridging that gap, the union budget allocated a hefty heirs 20,000 crore for the nuclear energy mission. What's the thinking behind that investment?
The budget emphasizes developing what are called small modular reactors, or SMRs, with the goal of having at least 5 up and running by 2033.
SMRs. We've been hearing a lot about those lately.
Yeah, they're getting a lot of attention.
Can you break down what this technology is all about for our listeners? And why is India focusing on SMRs specifically?
Think of SMRs as a more compact, more flexible approach to nuclear power.
Okay.
They have some advantages over those big traditional nuclear plants. For one, they have enhanced safety features. They also have a smaller footprint, meaning they take up less space. And the upfront investment costs are lower.
So potentially safer, smaller, and easier on the budget. Interesting.
Right. And there's another important aspect: indigenous development. India wants to build these reactors ourselves.
What does that involve exactly?
Well, the plan is to get the private sector involved in developing these Bharat small reactors, or BSRs, and then there's an even smaller version called the Bharat Small Modular Reactor, or BSMR.
Hold on, we've got BSRs and BSMRs now. What's the difference?
Think of BSRs as modified versions of India's existing pressurized heavy water reactors. Basically, taking our tried and true models and giving them a tech upgrade. BSMRs, though, are a newer concept globally. They're designed to be super compact and flexible, making them perfect for places with limited space or a less developed power grid.
So it's like a two-pronged approach. Refining existing tech with BSRs and exploring cutting-edge solutions with BSMRs. That's pretty strategic.
Exactly. It fits perfectly with India's push for energy independence and becoming more self-reliant when it comes to technology. But of course, we can't talk about nuclear energy without acknowledging the concerns that people have.
Of course, things like nuclear waste and reactor safety. Do SMRs address those issues?
SMRs are definitely designed with better safety features and containment systems than older reactors. And because they're modular, waste management is more efficient. But no matter what type of reactor you have, responsible waste disposal and strict safety protocols are absolutely crucial.
Right. So even though SMRs might be a game changer for clean energy, they're not a perfect solution. There are still challenges.
Absolutely. It's all about weighing the potential benefits against the risks and making sure we have the right regulations in place to ensure nuclear energy is developed safely and responsibly.
This conversation has been so insightful. We've gone from coal staying power to all the intricacies of renewable energy and now the potential of nuclear. It's a lot to take in. What are some key takeaways for all the UPSC aspirants out there who are listening?
I think the biggest takeaway is that India's energy scene is complex and constantly changing.
Yeah.
There's no single easy solution. Understanding this complexity is going to be crucial for the exam.
So what specifically should our listeners be focusing on?
First, they really need to grasp the concept of energy security and its four key components: availability, accessibility, affordability, and sustainability.
Got it.
Then they should dig into the challenges and opportunities of each energy source, whether it's coal, renewables, or nuclear.
Okay. That's a good starting point. Anything else?
Don't just memorize facts and figures. The UPSC exam is all about critical thinking and analysis. So connect the dots between the different energy sources, think about the trade-offs involved in policy decisions, and be ready to articulate a well-rounded view of India's energy challenges and potential solutions.
Awesome advice. Remember, everyone, the ability to really analyze complex issues like this is what's going to make you stand out in the exam.
Totally. And before we move on to the final part of our deep dive, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel.
We always love hearing from you. Leave us a comment with any questions or topics you'd like us to cover in future episodes. We'll be right back to wrap up our discussion and leave you with some food for thought. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into India's Energy Balancing Act.
Phew, we've covered a lot, right?
We have, from coal's dominance to renewables complexities and even the potential of nuclear power. So, what's the bottom line? How can India actually navigate this complex energy landscape and make sure we have a future that's both secure and sustainable?
Well, India is a country of contrasts.
What do you mean?
On one hand, we have this rapidly growing economy and these huge ambitions for development.
Right.
But we also have limited resources, environmental challenges, and a global energy market that's, well, let's just say it's unpredictable.
So how do we balance those competing demands? What's the path forward?
Honestly, there's no simple answer, no magic solution. It's going to take a multi-pronged approach, one that considers every single aspect of the energy equation.
Okay, so what are the key pieces of this approach?
First and foremost, diversification is absolutely essential.
Diversification meaning?
Meaning we can't put all our eggs in one basket.
I see.
If we rely too much on any one energy source, whether it's coal or even renewables, it leaves us super vulnerable to disruptions and price swing.
Makes sense. Spreading the risk.
Exactly. We got to play to our strengths. We've got those abundant coal reserves, huge solar potential, and expertise in nuclear technology. It's about finding that perfect mix of conventional and renewable sources to meet India's unique needs and keep the lights on.
And that's where strategic policy decisions come in, right?
Big time. The government plays a crucial role in shaping the whole energy landscape. They got to create policies that encourage investment in both renewable energy and clean technologies.
So what would that look like in reality?
Well, think streamlining the approvals for renewable energy projects, incentivizing domestic manufacturing of those critical minerals and technologies we talked about, and providing financial support for R&D in the renewable sector.
Right, so a lot of government support is needed. And what about global cooperation?
Huge. India can't do this alone. We need to be working with developed nations to get access to the latest and greatest technologies, share what we've learned, and secure the funding needed to speed up the transition.
So we're talking domestic policies, tech innovation, and international collaboration. A lot of moving parts.
It is. And this is where UPSC aspirants can really shine. The exam isn't about memorizing facts. It's about analyzing complex challenges, evaluating different policy options, and coming up with creative solutions.
Right, showing those analytical skills. So how can our listeners apply everything we've talked about today to their UPSC prep?
Start by really understanding that concept of energy security and its four key components. Remember those: availability, accessibility, affordability, and sustainability.
Right.
Then dig deeper into each energy source. Look at the pros and cons of each.
What kind of questions should they be thinking about?
Well, think about the trade-offs. Like, what are the social and economic costs of phasing out coal, and how can we minimize those? How can we make renewable energy sources more reliable and easier to integrate into the grid? How do we develop nuclear energy safely and responsibly?
All great points.
And don't be afraid to think outside the box. Come up with your own unique perspectives on these challenges and solutions. That's what'll impress the examiners and show that you really get it.
This has been an incredibly insightful deep dive. Any final thoughts for our listeners?
Remember, knowledge is power. The more you know about these crucial issues, the better prepared you'll be, not only for your UPSC exams, but for contributing to India's future.
Couldn't agree more. A huge thank you to the Indian Express for their amazing reporting, which made this discussion possible.
And to our listeners, keep those brains working, stay curious, and please leave us a comment with any questions or topics you'd like us to tackle in future episodes.
We love hearing from you. Until next time, happy learning and best of luck on your UPSC journey.